A nun with a dark past and a secret, fighting to uncover corruption and help save the lives of the most vulnerable children. Final Vow is a movie that you don't want to miss. When a 15-year-old girl is adopted from a Mexican orphanage run by nuns, Sister Anne-Marie begins to grow suspicious. She suspects that the couple who adopted the young girl has sold her to a local trafficking gang. Having a dark past of her own, Sister Anne-Marie dedicated herself to protecting the most innocent, vulnerable children, and she will stop at nothing. She faces danger, her own demons, and the horrifying truth on what really goes on within these trafficking gangs. Final Vow is a gripping, thrilling drama feature film that highlights the issue of trafficking and aims to educate the viewer to take action. It's a film that really opened my eyes and showed us how sadly so many people fall through the cracks. Using an innovative AI chat, you can speak to the characters and the creators of the film to ask them questions and learn more about their backstory. Something I have never seen before, and it just adds that extra layer and extra depth. I'm a person that always has 1,000 questions, and this feature will help answer them all. Tune into the award-winning movie exclusively on their website at https://finalvow.com to rent or buy the movie and take part in a one-of-a-kind experience interacting with the characters and the creators.
His family believed he was getting better until his final live stream. 18-year-old Shubnaz Aslam, better known as Shubi, wasn't just another name on the internet. He was a creative teenager from Stockton, California who loved anime, video games, and spending hours talking to his friends online. The people closest to him describe him as kind, loyal, and someone who genuinely cared about the people in his life. But behind that kindness, Shubi was fighting a battle that many people never fully saw. He had been open about living with severe depression. When the feelings of worthlessness became overwhelming, he talked to family and friends instead of keeping everything bottled up. Because he was so honest about his struggles, the people who loved him believed he was slowly getting better. They encouraged him, reminded him that he mattered, and hoped brighter days were ahead. Like many other teenagers, Shubi spent a lot of his time online. He was active in multiple internet communities, especially 4chans and R9K, where many people struggle with loneliness and isolation. While those spaces did give him a place to connect with others, they also exposed him to communities that normalize hopelessness instead of encouraging people to seek help. Then, one night in March of 2018, everything changed. Shubi started what would become his final live stream. During the broadcast, he grabbed a weapon and took his own life. Beforehand, he quietly slipped a note under his bedroom door, asking his family to not let the younger children see his body. It was a heartbreaking reminder that even in the midst of his own pain, he was still thinking about protecting the people he loved. In the years that followed, his story spread across the internet. His name became part of online discussions, TikTok edits, internet lore, and dark forums. For many people who discovered him years later, he became a mystery or a symbol of internet culture. But behind every repost, every edit, and every discussion was a real person. He wasn't internet lore, and he wasn't just a live stream. He was an 18-year-old boy whose life was tragically cut short by depression. This case was specifically heavy and dealt with some mental health issues that I know can be very triggering, so I just want to give you a hug. Bring it in. With that being said, I want to know what you guys think about this case, so leave it down in the comments below.
There's a horrific murder case that's happening right now out of Arizona that's still unsolved. Let's talk about what happened to Mercedes Vega. On April 16th of this year, Mercedes was abducted from the parking garage of her Tempe, Arizona apartment and brutally killed. That night, security footage shows her walking into her apartment's parking garage a little after 9 p.m. She was on her way to meet her friends and have a fun night at Dave & Buster's, but in this footage, she had no idea what was about to happen to her. Sometime before making it to her car, she was attacked and taken by at least 2 people, and the details that follow are still a mystery. A little after 1 a.m. the next morning, the Department of Public Safety was called in to investigate a car that was on fire along the side of Interstate 10 in Tonopah. Upon arriving to the scene, they found Mercedes' burned body in the back seat, and she was deceased. In the last few hours of her life, she was tortured, and according to the medical examiner, she had been shot in the arm, had blunt force trauma to her head, and had traces of bleach in her throat. But all of this did not kill her. She ultimately died from smoke inhalation while being burned alive in that car. Investigators also found gloves and bleach in the front seat and lighter fluid in the back, but there are still a ton of questions that remain in this case, and nothing about this makes any sense. The car that Mercedes was found in was not her car. Her car, which was a 2019 Dodge Charger, was found abandoned near Mill Avenue in Tempe. She was not burned in her own vehicle, and so far, investigators still don't know who the car she was found in belongs to. One of the big questions in this case is, how did her car get from her apartment to where it was found? And who drove the other car to Tonopah? Mercedes' parents believe that this was a targeted attack and that death wasn't the ultimate goal, but that Mercedes fought back, which resulted in her death. Her parents mentioned that she danced at a club 2 nights a week, and many question if her death could possibly be connected back to someone she met while at work. It's now been 7 months, and Mercedes' murder is still unsolved. Whoever committed this vicious attack is still out there. Right now, there is a silent witness award of up to $2,000 for information leading to an arrest. But if you'd like to donate to up that reward or to report a tip, please contact the number on the screen. For more information on this case and to show your support, please follow this account that was created for Mercedes that's run by her family. She and her family deserve justice.
This 11-year-old girl was held captive for 18 years and found alive. This is actually the case that got me into true crime when I was 11 years old. JC Lee Dugard was only 11 years old when she was walking to her school bus. A car pulled up next to her, grabbed her, and drove off with her. JC's stepfather actually witnessed her abduction, tried to get on his bike to go after the car that took his stepdaughter, but unfortunately was not fast enough. JC was abducted by this married couple, Philip and Nancy Garrido, and the hate I feel for these two people is... Nancy and Philip drove JC to their house over 100 miles away. And that is when Philip Garrido SA'd JC for the first time. The Garridos had a long rectangular property that they cut in half with a fence, so people thought that their property line ended before it actually did, and they kept JC in like that back half of the property with all these like tarps and sheds. JC spent most of her time alone and was only ever visited by Philip so he could SA her. It's so sad because JC had so many opportunities to be found. Philip was a known SA offender and on probation at the time, and a probation officer would come to the home and do like inspections of the house, never realizing that JC was being held captive in the backyard behind the fence. 2 years after JC was abducted, she got pregnant by Philip for the first time when she was only 13 years old. A few years after that, JC had her second daughter and tried her best to educate her 2 daughters with her 5th grade education. And again, this is just so heartbreaking, but I guess Philip's wife Nancy was insecure that JC was the mother of his children, like JC wanted to be there, being SA'd by her husband. So Nancy insisted that the 2 young girls would grow up thinking that Nancy was their mother and JC was just like their big sister. Philip Garrido was clearly very mentally unwell. He thought that angels were talking to him through the wall, and it only got worse when he started abusing hard substances. And he was actually convinced that God wanted him to take and SA little girls. And by 2009, Philip Garrido had convinced himself that he was being spoken to by God, that he was the chosen one and was meant to spread God's word. In the next part, I'm going to tell you guys how this actually led to JC being found 18 years after she was abducted, so comment for part 2.
She was happily walking down the aisle in her back garden to get married, but none of the guests had any idea in that same back garden was the body of her dead husband she'd buried after murdering. Michael and Lori Shaver were school sweethearts. They were in their 30s and they lived in Florida and had 2 children together. From the outside looking in, they looked like the perfect family unit. Lori was hardworking and had a good job with an insurance company, and Michael worked on the monorail at Disney World. I don't know if anybody else, whenever I hear the word monorail, I just think about the Simpsons episode that's like, monorail. On the 7th of November 2015, Michael went to a local tractor show with his family and his his friend and colleague Frank. Frank just felt like there was a strange vibe between the married couple, Michael and Laurie, that day. He felt like there was a bit of tension, but isn't there sometimes with married couples, like you have an argument and you feel a bit frosty? He just figured they would resolve it and it would be fine. However, the next week at work, Michael didn't show up. It was like 3 days with no contact from him. The only actual communication, and it wasn't like physical communication, it was just a text, was a message saying that he was quitting his job to save his marriage. Frank, obviously being a good friend to Michael, headed to his house just to check in. And when he got there, he was really surprised to see Laurie just there as normal with no regard for where her husband was. She didn't seem concerned that Michael had just vanished. She told Frank that he'd just decided to up and leave the family. She seemed calm, she didn't seem distressed in any way, so Frank felt this was really weird. However, some of Michael's family members were getting text messages off him. He very much seemed like he wanted to be left alone. He was saying like, I don't have a family, leave me alone. It kind of felt like he had gone off on his own accord. In fact, over the next couple of years, nobody physically saw Michael. They just got these weird texts from time to time off him. It just kind of seemed like he wasn't in a very good headspace. Laurie, as I said, didn't seem too bothered by this. She very quickly moved on from her husband, apparently walking out on her, and started dating a guy called Jeremy Townsend. But there was one issue. Jeremy was already married. They started dating in secret until the affair was revealed in the most dramatic way. Jeremy's wife suddenly found out that his husband was having an affair with Laurie because she was sent a bunch of flowers. Now, this bouquet had a note with it, seemingly from Michael. Remember, Michael's gone off the radar by this point. Note said, "Roses are red, violets are blue. My wife is a beep. Your husband is too." The note also said, "Sorry about this. Check your Facebook message. We need to talk, Mike." So we'll circle back to this, but at this point, basically, Jeremy's wife found out and Laurie and Jeremy stopped seeing each other. Fast forward to February 2018, Michael's friend Scott felt, enough's enough. I haven't seen him for years. He called police. He just felt like there's something so strange here. By this point, Laurie, the queen of moving on quickly, had found yet another guy to date, but she decided to marry this one. This was Travis Filmer. Now, the pair had a beautiful wedding ceremony in Laurie's back garden, but remember, Michael's still nowhere to be seen. I don't know how she managed to marry a new guy when she's already technically married to the other guy who's vanished. Remember, police had been tipped off by Michael's friend that something just wasn't right, so they did head over to the house to do a welfare check for Michael. Now, they didn't find Michael at the house, obviously, but what they did spot was very concerning. This kind of looks like there's a body in the concrete. The ground, as you can see, was weird on one part of the land, so they ended up excavating the ground, and turns out, lo and behold, Michael's body was buried under there. His skeletal remains had been buried in the garden this entire time. He wasn't sending those texts at all to his family, it was Laurie. He'd been wrapped in a sheet and had been shot. Now, Travis denied all knowledge of any of this. He believed the lies that Laurie had told him about her first husband just vanishing. Interestingly, he is adamant she didn't kill him. I don't know whether that's denial, whether he just doesn't want to believe that he would marry a murderer. And remember those flowers that were sent to the boyfriend's wife? Well, it turned out the flowers were actually sent from Laurie herself. They were paid for by her bank account. Maybe she wanted to split up the married couple because she was enjoying, obviously, dating the woman's husband. I don't know, but it gets even crazier. At the murder trial, Michael and Laurie's 15-year-old daughter, Isabel, testified. Now, bear in mind, people are pretty sure at this point that Laurie has clearly murdered her first husband. Well, Isabel at the trial testified that she had witnessed a violent confrontation back when she was 7 years old. She said she got a gun from her mum's room and shot her dad. She also said that Jeremy, the one with the wife and the flowers, was also there and he shot the dad too. Now, Jeremy denied this whole thing and the jury did not buy this story at all. Isabel didn't seem to be telling the truth. She kept using the word think. She seemed very unsure. Bear in mind she was 7 at the time when her dad disappeared. She was saying like, I think I did X, Y, Z. She seemed to be kind of looking for reassurance. She also couldn't say for sure any details, like whether she hit him in the back of the head or not. I feel, and the jury felt, that the child had been coerced by her mother to lying about this whole thing and trying to get her mother off. The mum had tried to also use Jeremy as a scapegoat. In 2024, Laurie was found guilty of second-degree murder and was given life in prison.
Storytime om den 15-åriga flickan som brutalt mördar sin 9-åriga granne. Tjejen det handlar om heter Alyssa och hon har haft allt annat än en lätt uppväxt. Hennes föräldrar var kusiner, bara det, och de var även missbrukare så att de var inga bra föräldrar och de hade ingen bra miljö hemma. Så när Alyssa är 9 år gammal får hon flytta till sin mormor med sina 3 småsyskon. Hennes mormor och morfar bestämmer sig för att de ska flytta till en mindre stad så att de kan få en ny start på livet typ. Men även om Alyssa bara var 9 år gammal så hade hon redan börjat visa tendenser på att hon var väldigt våldsam och hon var liksom inte en vanlig 9-åring. Hon var bara extremt våldsam och aggressiv för att vara så liten och skulle verkligen ha varit lite terapi, men det fick hon inte. Och när Alyssa blir äldre, runt 14-15, så börjar hon också klä sig lite så här emo-stil och lite mörkare, och hon blir också väldigt mycket mer våldsam och aggressiv. För en 15-åring som har gått igenom en sån här barndom så är det egentligen ganska normalt att bete sig så här, men hon börjar också fantisera om att börja mörda människor, och det berättar hon för sina vänner också. Hon börjar dagligen fantisera och hon skriver i sina dagböcker om hur det skulle vara att mörda någon och hur det skulle kännas. Så en dag i oktober bestämmer hon sig för att göra det på riktigt. Så en fredag i oktober är hon ledig från skolan, och ett normalt skolbarn kanske hade hittat på någonting med sina kompisar eller någonting sånt, men inte Alyssa. På sin lediga dag bestämmer hon sig för att gå ut i skogen och gräva ett hål, och det hålet visar sig sedan vara en grav. Så senare på kvällen tar Alyssa sin lilla syster som är 6 år gammal ut för att leka på gården. De är ute och leker en stund, och efter ett tag så frågar Alyssa hennes lilla syster om inte hon kan hämta sin grannkompis som är 9 år gammal och heter Elizabeth. Så hennes lilla syster tänker bara att det är kul med en till lekkompis som är mer hennes ålder, men det var inte Alyssas plan överhuvudtaget. Så lilla systern går och frågar när granntjejen om hon vill komma och leka, och hennes mamma säger absolut, följ med så länge du är tillbaka inom en timme. Men hon kom inte tillbaka inom en timme, och hon kom inte tillbaka överhuvudtaget. Så när hon har hämtat granntjejen så säger Lisa åt sin lilla syster att gå hem igen för att hon vill leka själv med den här granntjejen. Så lilla systern gör som hon blir tillsagd att gå hem igen, medan Alyssa lurar ut granntjejen Elizabeth ut i skogen. Ni vet, till skogen där hon hade grävt sin grav tidigare. Så 15-åriga Alyssa bestämmer sig för att brutalt mörda den här 9-åriga tjejen i skogen. Så när hon är klar med det här mordet så springer hon tillbaka till sitt rum hemma och skriver ner i sin dagbok hur exalterad hon är över vad hon har gjort precis. Och i dagboken skriver hon ner i detalj vad hon gjorde för någonting. Hon skriver även it was amazing och att det var väldigt enjoyable, så att hon njöt av det hon gjorde. Och Elizabeth skulle vara hemma inom en timme, så hennes mamma, men hon kommer ju aldrig hem, så hon ringer polisen på en gång för hon fattar att någonting är väldigt fel. Och den som såg sist med henne var ju då Alyssa, så att de går igenom hennes rum för att se vad hon har för någonting där, och då hittar de dagboken med alla bevis. Så polisen tar in henne för förhör såklart, för att de har ju sett vad hon har skrivit i sin dagbok, och hon nekar till allting först. Men sen tar polisen upp att de har hittat hennes dagbok, och då ändrar hon sin story direkt. Då säger hon, ja, jag var ute och lekte med henne och hon slog i huvudet och dog. Men på flickans kropp, när de ska liksom kolla vad som har hänt, så ser de också att någon har liksom skrivit upp hennes hals och sådana saker. Och då frågar de Alyssa i förhöret, men vad hände med hennes hals? Varför var den liksom uppskuren? Och då erkänner hon till allting. Så Alyssa blir dömd till livstid i fängelse, tack och lov. Jag fick även veta att Alyssa satt i fängelse tillsammans med Gypsy Rose. Bara en liten side note. Så de var i samma typ av kvinnofängelse, apparently. Men det var veckans storytime, och som vanligt ny storytime varje torsdag.
I don't know how some parents just trust anyone with their kids. After you hear the story time, you're never gonna let your kid out of your sight. This is definitely one of those story times that kept me up at night, so you guys already know the drill. If I'm up, you're up. Apparently, it is also a true story, and it happened in Israel. So the story is about a family, so a mom, a husband, and a child who just moved into a new apartment complex. So one day, their downstairs neighbor comes, introduces themselves, and basically just says that they have a child the same age as your child, and says, we're having a birthday party tomorrow, you guys need to come. Obviously, you just moved into a new place, you want to make friends, so she says, yeah, of course, like, we'll be there. Stories like this really, really scare me, because I have 3 nephews. Like, if any of this happened to my nephews, I don't know what I would would do. Like, I would crash out and I'd go to jail. The next day comes around and the mom is just cleaning up a little bit before they get ready to go to this party. But the neighbor comes upstairs anyways and says, hey, like, all the kids are downstairs. They can all hear the music from their home, and says, you know, like, let me just take the kid and then you guys take your time and come together. And the mom says, okay, and lets her child go with this neighbor that she has no idea, nothing about. So now the husband comes from work and he's like, where's my child? You know, the wife tells him, like, you know, he's downstairs. They took him because all the kids were already there. They can hear the music coming from the neighbors. So they're not thinking much of it at all. I don't think I would either. So now the wife goes downstairs and knocks on the door of the neighbor. She's hearing the music happening inside, but nobody opens the door. And then she just goes back upstairs to come back down with her husband. So now the husband gets ready and they go down together. They're knocking on the door. They're hearing the music. They hear everything, but nobody opens the door. Now they get worried and the husband's like, yeah, call the police immediately. So now the police come and they're knocking on the door. They hear the music too, but then they bust the door open. They go inside, come to find out nobody lives in that unit. They think it was squatters, but they end up finding their child in the bathroom dead and all of his organs taken out. Like, I did not realize how common people are abducted just for their organs, and especially little kids. Like, it's actually so sickening. It's just so scary to me because you really think there's like good people in this world. You know, I know the mom didn't think nothing of it, and so did the kid. The kid just wanted to go to a birthday party and the mom just wanted to make neighbor friends. Come to find out nobody even lives there, and now your kid is gone. Like, that is so sad. But just as a parent, you can't just let anyone have your kids. Like, you can't trust anyone because people are genuinely sick in this world, and I'm learning that every single day through these stories. I heard this story time and it really reminded me of the story time that happened to the girl in Mexico, and it's just sad to me because it doesn't matter about the age. It can be like an adolescent girl, an old lady, a man, even a child. People will literally take you just for your organs. Like, I think that is so upsetting. Just wanted to share awareness. But if you're a parent, please do not trust just anyone with your kids. Like, no one. Literally no one. Love you.
She was pregnant for 2 years and then gave birth to a goat. 28-year-old Alphonsine lived in Nigeria with her husband and 6 kids. She was pregnant with her 7th child, and her husband were patiently waiting for the arrival of their baby. It seemed like everything was going well in her pregnancy until her last trimester. Alphonsine was now in her 9th month, typically when a baby is born, but she still didn't go into labor. She went to the doctor to see if something was wrong with the baby, and they told her it would be better if she was referred to a more specialized hospital. Alphonsine didn't have the money to go to a different kind of hospital, so she decided just to go home and wait it out. As she was waiting, days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and still no baby. At this point, she has now been pregnant for 2 years. One day, Alphonsine starts to have excruciating pain and goes into labor at home. As she is in labor, she starts pushing and something comes out, but it's not a baby, it's a goat. Where she lived, it was a very small village, and word quickly spread around that she gave birth to a goat. Many people started to believe that this was an act of witchcraft from someone who wished evil on her marriage. And others thought that she was just lying, just doing this for attention. However, this greatly affected her husband because he felt like she had evil spirits, so he left her and their 6 kids. Since her husband left her, Alphonsine decided to go live with her mother, and she became the laughing stock of the village. He vowed to never come back, and he ended up marrying a different woman. Alphonsine truly believes that someone used witchcraft to ruin her marriage.
There's a strange missing persons case happening right now out of Oregon, and we should talk about it. This is Gwen Brunel. She went missing during a solo road trip from Boise, Idaho to California. She told family and friends that she was meeting up with a nationally recognized rabbit judge in a small town near Fresno, but she never made it. The timeline of events after she left her home is bizarre, and it's what makes this case so strange. Gwen left her home in Boise on June 26th of this year. The trip seemed really sudden to her family and friends, but she told them that she was planning on meeting up with a rabbit judge in California to show some of her show rabbits. From a very young age, she was an expert on raising and showing purebred rabbits, so much so that she had won awards and was nationally recognized. It was her calling, and she loved her rabbits. So that day, she packed up her 2008 Honda Element with some personal belongings, some clothes for a road trip, and 3 cages filled with 11 of her show rabbits. Also packed up was about a week's worth of food and water for the rabbits. She promised her dad that she would keep in touch, but no one heard from her again after she stepped foot outside of her house, and her cell phone was soon shut off. Gwen was then spotted at a convenience store about 20 miles from her home. But what's strange is that she was caught on CCTV footage wearing different clothes from when she left her house. She left her home in a blue shirt and Nike shoes, but at the store she was wearing a red shirt and knee-high dress boots. What's also weird is that the store was only 20 miles away, yet it took her 3 hours to get there, and no one knows what she was doing in the meantime. Gwen was officially last seen in Jordan Valley, Oregon 1 day later. She had stopped at a Sinclair gas station around noon, got gas, and then went across the street to buy snacks at Mrs. Z's convenience store. There she told the attendant that she was in a hurry, but she then spent the next hour in the parking lot in her car without moving. This concerned the worker, so they went out to make sure that she was okay, but Gwen stated that she was fine. But after this, she disappeared, and it didn't take long for her parents to report her missing. 4 days later, Gwen's car was found abandoned near Sucker Creek Road in Malheur County, just a half-mile from the highway. It was reportedly parked at a pullout that was commonly used by visitors. All 4 windows were partially open, and the keys and the rest of her personal belongings, including her credit cards and driver's license, were still inside. Also inside of the car were all 11 of her rabbits, but sadly at this point, because of the heat, 5 of them had perished. Authorities and dozens of volunteers began searching for Gwen in the area near where her car was found, and even a private search of Sucker Creek was conducted, but nothing would be found for 2 months. On September 10th, Gwen's t-shirt was found tangled up in a barbed wire fence near Dog Creek. Shortly after, Gwen's boots were found roughly 80 yards from where the shirt was found. This was all found less than 2 miles from where her abandoned car was found months earlier. More than 300 miles have been searched using ATVs, dogs, and even by air, but no other trace of Gwen has ever been found. Police say that there is no sign of an abduction and believe that she may have wandered off into the rangeland. But like I mentioned earlier, Gwen absolutely loved her rabbits. It would be incredibly odd for her to leave them in a hot car to perish without willingly coming back. According to her family, Gwen did take medications for certain mental conditions that could make her moody or inattentive. Her mom reached out to the rabbit judge that Gwen was supposed to meet, and according to them, they never heard from Gwen and had no idea that she was even planning to come. They said that they weren't expecting Gwen at all. This has left her family wondering if she was planning on meeting up with someone else and just didn't tell them. Her mom believes that Gwen is still somewhere out there on the rangeland and wonders if she was possibly going through a mental crisis. Regardless, they just want to bring their daughter home. It's now been 5 months with no sign of Gwen, and just like with the Chelsea Grimm case, it's really concerning that her car was found abandoned and that she was a woman traveling alone. Gwen is described as being 5'7", roughly 140 pounds, and has brown hair and brown eyes. If you have any information at all, please either contact the Boise Police at 208-377-6790 or the Malheur County Sheriff's Office at 541-473-5125.
Imagine being so mad that women didn't want you, you decided to massacre innocent people. That's exactly what happened on May 23rd, 2014. 22-year-old Elliot Rodger wasn't raised in the kind of environment most people would expect. He grew up in California in a pretty comfortable home. His dad worked in Hollywood, his mom worked as a nurse, and despite his parents divorcing when he was 7, he was never raised in abuse or chaos. In fact, he still has stability, therapy, and opportunities that most people don't get. The issue was what was going on inside his head. He struggled with severe social anxiety and was later diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. But instead of working through his isolation in a healthy way, he started building this mindset that he was supposed to be desired. Like women were just supposed to want him because of his status, his looks, and his life. And when that didn't happen, he didn't reflect. He blamed them. He started calling himself the supreme gentleman. But underneath that was growing resentment. Rejection wasn't just rejection to him. It became something deeply personal, something that he thought was unfair, and over time, it turned into straight up hatred. By 22, he was stuck on one thing. He was still a virgin. He couldn't handle it. He started believing women were cruel for not giving him the love he felt he deserved, and he got more and more jealous of couples and other men living normal lives. Instead of snapping out of it, he fed into it. He isolated himself even more and started writing everything down. That's when he created a 137-page two-page manifesto called My Twisted World. He basically laid out years of resentment, anger, and eventually his plan. Just minutes before the attack, he uploaded a final YouTube video. He was calm and collected as he ranted on and on about what he called his day of retribution. On May 23, 2014, he acted on it. He stabbed his roommates Ching Young Hung and George Chen, along with their friend David Wang, inside his apartment. Then he drove to the Alpha Phi sorority house at UC Santa Barbara, trying to target women there. When he couldn't get inside, he opened fire outside and killed Catherine Cooper and Veronica Wise. After that, he drove through Isla Vista, shooting at people randomly. He killed Christopher Martinez inside of a deli and injured 14 others before the police finally caught up with them. He eventually died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Afterwards, his name spread online in the worst way. In some incel spaces, he was glorified, even called Saint Elliot. But outside of that, the world saw something else completely. A warning about what happens when unchecked entitlement, isolation, and resentment turns into violence and hatred. What do you guys think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.
We've all heard of the poisoned Halloween candy myth, but what if I told you that it wasn't a myth? And that it really did happen. The killer was called the Candyman. Hi, I'm Meg. I talk about true crime. Let's get into this case, and happy Halloween. Texas, 1974. Ronald Clark O'Brien lived with his wife Diane and 2 kids. His 8-year-old son Timothy and his 5-year-old daughter Elizabeth. They seemed like a pretty normal, happy family. They were religious, they attended church, etc., etc. And on Halloween night of 1974, exactly 49 years ago today, they went trick-or-treating. Ronald's wife Diane did not go trick-or-treating with him and the kids, but he did go with a neighbor and his 2 kids. During the trick-or-treating, they got to someone's door and the kids knocked and no one answered, so the kids got pretty impatient and they just went on to the next house. But for some reason, Ronald stayed behind for a sec, but it wasn't long before he caught up with the group again, and he had 5 pixie sticks in his hand. Ronald claimed that whoever was in the house eventually answered and handed him 5 pixie sticks. If you don't know what a pixie stick is, it's one of those like plastic tubes with like the sugar stuff in them. He ended up giving 1 pixie stick to each of his children, 2 to the neighbor kids, and then 1 to a boy he recognized from church. The night then came to an end and everybody headed home. Right before bedtime, Timothy asked his dad if he could have a piece of his candy, and according to Ronald, the piece of candy that Timothy decided to eat was the pixie stick. He apparently struggled to get the actual powder out of the tube, and his dad was helping him, and he immediately was like, ew. Timothy claimed that the sugar tasted really bitter. At that point, Ronald gave Timothy some Kool-Aid, kind of just to wash the gross taste away. And immediately after that, Timothy started complaining that his stomach really hurt. He then apparently started vomiting a lot and convulsing. Ronald was apparently holding him while he was being sick, and then Timothy just went limp in his arms. They tried to drive him to the hospital, but by that time it was too late, and Timothy passed away in the car less than an hour after eating that pixie stick. The community was terrified when they heard about this, because obviously all of their kids had just gone trick-or-treating as well and had been eating their candy. So a bunch of parents just started giving the Halloween candy to the police. They were taking everything they could find and just handing it in hopes that they would find out what caused it. The autopsy determined that it was in fact the pixie stick that killed Timothy and that it had cyanide in it. Enough cyanide to kill 2 to 4 grown adults. Timothy was only 8. At this point, I think that Ronald must have told the police who else got the pixie sticks, so they were able to track those families down. And luckily, none of the other kids had consumed theirs except for one family. When the police arrived, the parents could not find the pixie stick anywhere. They ran up to their son's room and found him asleep with the pixie stick in his hand. And thank God this boy wasn't able to open the packet because it had been stapled, which is very suspicious looking. I don't know how no one noticed that. But he wasn't able to take the staple off to open the pixie stick, so he just gave up and fell asleep. But if he had cut it open or anything, he would have been dead. I can't imagine how his parents felt. Oh my god, I think I would have been sick. Obviously, police started questioning Ronald about what happened that night,
and he said that he couldn't remember what house he got it from. They actually walked him around the neighborhood 3 separate times before he eventually, pointed at a house and was like, that's the one. He claimed that once the kids tried to knock and no one answered, they ran away, and then the door, cracked open. It was dark, the lights weren't on, and a hand kind of stuck out of the door and handed him these pixie sticks. The only detail that Ronald could give about this arm that he saw was that it was hairy, so most likely a man's arm. And so police's next steps were to find out who owned that house. Police looked into the man who lived in that home, and the man worked at an airport, and he hadn't been home on Halloween night until 11 p.m., which was way after the trick-or-treating happened. And there was around 200 people who were able to, be an alibi for him, so he was definitely not home. At this point, after everything, there was only one person who was really a suspect, and that was Ronald. Police then started digging into Ronald's past, and what they found was very interesting. Ronald was $100,000 in debt at the time, which would add up to be around $500,000 in today's money. Also seemed to not be able to hold a job because he had 21 jobs in the past 10 years. Only months before Timothy's death, he had taken life insurance out on both of his kids. And as it got closer to Halloween, he kept upping the insurance on his kids. It got up to around $300,000 in today's money, which was, I believe, around $60,000 back then. Which begs the question, were both kids meant to eat a pixie stick that night? He also called the life insurance company the day after his son died. The day after. To make things even worse, police found out that he had tried to buy cyanide only months before, but found out it was too expensive and just left the pharmacy. At this point, they had enough evidence to arrest him. I mean, it was pretty obvious. He still claimed innocence, though. Ronald was arrested on November 5th of 1974. They were trying to charge him with 1 count of murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. He pled not guilty, and so it went into trial. During the trial, a few people came forward. So a chemist came forward who was acquainted with Ronald, and he basically was like, Ronald was asking me how much cyanide would kill a person. That is a little bit suspicious, if you ask me. People who knew him also claimed that he wouldn't stop talking about cyanide months before Halloween. Yet another man said that Ronald asked him where he could buy cyanide. His motive was to get the life insurance money and be out of debt a little bit. Surely he would have been a little bit more discreet. Ronald's wife, Diane, also came forward saying that Timothy was not the one who chose to eat the pixie stick. Ronald was like, oh, you should eat one of those. Yeah, you should eat that piece of candy right there, the pixie stick. You should eat that one. The jury took a while to actually make a decision, but they did find him guilty in the end. Ronald was executed on the 31st of March, 1984, when he was 39 years old. His wife, Diane, had divorced him the moment, basically, he was found guilty, and she is now remarried. I can't imagine what it's like to be Elizabeth, the daughter, because I think that she was meant to die that night as well, because he had taken life insurance out on the both of them. So, who knows? How messed up do you have to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm in debt. Oh, I'll just kill one of my kids. Oh, I'll kill my kids. It's fine. I can just make more. It didn't even work. There was no, it's just awful. I feel so bad for Diane. So that's the case of the Candyman. I hope you guys found that case interesting. I thought it was really interesting. I'd never heard about it. I hope that you have a wonderful Halloween. Let me know how it's going. I'm not doing anything today. I'm just gonna chill and watch Halloween Town or something. I hope you guys all have an amazing Halloween and don't eat any suspicious looking candies. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.
Cases dividing the internet, but regardless of what you believe, there is a tiny little baby out there missing, and it's terrifying. So let's take a look together at what the hell has gone on here.
I got him out of the car seat and I laid him down and so I could get his diapers ready. And somebody said, Hola, and that's all I remember. and I saw white. And a hearing sound, I fell on the floor, and as soon as I got up, I couldn't find my son. I checked around my truck, and I ran into Big 5, and I asked the lady if she saw a baby or someone with a baby. She said no. It was a happy boy. He smiled.
Whoever took our son, please give him back.
Now, as you can probably tell from that clip, police are currently searching for a tiny little 7-month-old baby called Emmanuel Harrow. He was reportedly kidnapped in San Bernardino County, California. So just days ago, on the 14th of August, just before 8 p.m, the child's mum said she was parked outside a Big 5 store. She said she needed to go and buy a mouthguard for her other son, and she noticed her baby, who she was carrying at the time, needed his nappy changing. So she said she went to like the back of the car that she was in to get him changed when someone said hola, and then all of a sudden it went white. She couldn't see anything, and she just stood up. She had been knocked on the ground. She stood up and she was unable to see her child anymore. Obviously, you can see from that clip that the mum does appear to have a black eye, and surely there would be some kind of CCTV from the car park, which I hope police are looking into. The parents were apparently watching some sort of sports game for one of their children, and they have 4 other children as well as this baby. Police have stated that the mother's story did have inconsistencies. I don't know what they are, and they aren't ruling out foul play. Now, they didn't release any details about potential attackers, no sort of descriptions of the person who potentially stole this baby. He stated that Rebecca, the mum, was confronted with some of the inconsistencies in her story, and she declined to continue with the interview. Now, this could obviously be for many, many reasons. Canine team, so like the dog team, were brought in to try and trace the scent of the child, because sometimes that is how they can track missing children, but unfortunately the dogs weren't able to pick up a scent. Emmanuel's parents are urging anybody with information to come forward. Rebecca stated, "I'm begging you, if you know anything, please. I'm begging you to bring him back."
This is how this little girl was found alive after being kidnapped for 18 years. If you're not already familiar with the case of J.C. Lee Dugard, part 1 is below. So when we left off in part 1, J.C.'s captor, Philip Garrido, had convinced himself that he was the chosen one and God wanted him to spread his word. By this point, it's 2009, J.C. had been held captive by Philip and his wife Nancy for 18 years and had had 2 of Philip's children. And Philip's delusions about being the chosen one by God were growing more and more every day. And Philip was so confident in his religious views and the control he had over these 3 women that he held captive that he took J.C.'s 2 daughters with him to the University of California, Berkeley, to spread God's word. And this is just women's intuition, because 2 female officers that were on campus that day took note of Philip and JC's 2 daughters' odd behavior and just had a sense that something wasn't right. So they took Philip's information and asked him if he'd be interested in returning to the campus the following day. And in the meantime, they had a fellow officer do a background check on Philip Garrido and found out that not only was he a registered SA offender, but he was on parole for kidnapping and SA. Due to Philip Garrido's parole, he was supposed to have 0 contact with minors. So the 2 female police officers called up Philip's parole officer and said, "Hey, we're kind of concerned about Philip Garrido's daughters." And the parole officer on the other line was stunned, and all he said was, "Philip Garrido doesn't have any daughters." So Philip Garrido was told to have a meeting with the parole officer the following day, and he was so confident that he could just explain the whole thing away. Not only did he bring JC's 2 daughters to the parole office with him, he brought JC as well. And luckily, the officers split everyone apart. They had Philip in one room, the 2 girls in another, and JC in a separate room speaking with separate officers. Philip introduced JC as Alyssa, who was a family friend, and the 2 girls were just her 2 daughters. But after being interrogated for quite some time, Philip admitted that Alyssa wasn't Alyssa. Officers at this point are pretty convinced that JC had been kidnapped, probably as a child. So they're asking her, pleading, "Please just tell us who you are." And eventually she agreed that she would write down her name. And she did. She wrote J.C. Lee Dugard. It had been 18 years since JC Dugard had been kidnapped, and finally she was able to be reunited with her mother and her baby sister, who was only a toddler when JC was kidnapped. JC was now 29 years old, and this case was like national news. Everyone was talking about this amazing, strong woman that was held captive for almost 2 decades. And I'm sure a lot of you guys remember it because she was like on the cover of every magazine at the grocery store. I mean, that's how I first heard about JC and how I got into true crime. Honestly, JC is like a hero to me. She inspires me so much. I was 11 years old when she was found, so I was the same age that she was when she was kidnapped. And I was such a bratty 11-year-old kid. And JC's story really changed my whole viewpoint on life as a child. Philip Garrido was sentenced to 431 years, and his wife Nancy was sentenced to 36 to life. I remember seeing some years back that there might be a connection between Philip and some unsolved unalivings of S workers, but I couldn't really find any updates. So let me know in the comments if you know any more updates on that and what case got you into true crime.
He lost his virginity to his mom's corpse. On March 27th of 2014, 18-year-old Kevin Davis was frustrated, bored with life, and told his mom that he didn't like people and he wanted to end his life. His mom, 50-year-old Kimberly, was caught off guard at first, but told him that if that's what he really wanted to do, she couldn't stop him. When Kevin heard this, he became enraged, and instead of taking his own life, he was going to take his mom's life. As Kimberly was sitting on the couch watching TV, Kevin came behind her and strangled her with a cord. She started to scream, so Kevin panicked, grabbed a hammer, and smashed her skull with it. He hit her with that hammer at least 20 times, which split her skull. Kevin then grabbed a kitchen knife and inserted it into his mother's head and swirled around her brain to make sure that she was actually dead. He would then put his hand inside his mother's wound and described it as putty. But Kevin wasn't done there. He then dragged his mom's lifeless body to her bedroom and ate her. Once Kevin was done, he went to a nearby neighbor's house and told them that he had unalived someone, so they called 911. Once Kevin was at the police station, he gave a full confession, giving all of the details. When he was talking with detectives, he told them that he always had this fantasy of doing it with a corpse, and now he finally lost his virginity. Kevin claimed that his mother was such a good mother and she truly did not deserve that. He was just a horrible person, but if he were to ever get released, he would do it again. Kevin was sentenced to life in prison but will be eligible for parole in March of 2044.
This man's horrific crimes led to the biggest manhunt in New York City's history. He is known as the Son of Sam, or the 44 caliber killer, a serial killer that truly caused mass panic. Hi, I'm Meg. I talk about true crime. Let's get into this case.
Well, he said, "You got me." Police say those words ended the biggest manhunt in New York City history with the capture of Son of Sam.
It just consumed me. The guilt ruins not just my life, 12 other lives, plus the families. So, how do you forgive something like that? Somebody like that? You don't.
Born June 1st, 1953 in Brooklyn, New York, this man's real name was David Berkowitz. David was not an easy child. He was known for kind of being like the neighborhood bully. He was occasionally violent. His intelligence was actually above average, but he stopped caring about school at a young age. Instead of caring about school, he cared more about petty crimes, such as stealing. He was actually adopted as a baby, and he was apparently quite close with his adoptive mother. But unfortunately, she died of breast cancer when he was around 14 years old, which is when his behavior apparently got a lot worse. Some described his behavior as erratic. When he was around 18, his stepfather remarried and moved to Florida. When David was 18, he decided to join the army, but this would not last long. He was apparently an excellent marksman, but he left the army after only 3 years. So he was there from 1971 to 1974. Police would later find out through his diaries that he claimed to have set 1,500 fires in New York City during that time. So his crimes went from theft to arson. But for some reason, in December of 1975, arson turned to murder. David admitted to stabbing 2 women on Christmas Eve of 1975. one of which actually survived. Her name was Michelle, and she was hospitalized for her wounds. But the second woman was never identified. They never knew who this woman was or if she even existed. David claimed that he stabbed 2 women that night. But in the summer of 1976, his spree really began. 19-year-old Jody and 18-year-old Donna were sat in a parked car in the Bronx. It was the 29th of July, 1976, and suddenly both girls were shot. Only Jody survived this attack, and police, obviously they investigated it, but it just seemed like a random attack. They had no idea what was to come. A similar shooting happened later that year on the 23rd of October, this time in Queens. 19-year-old Carl and Rosemary were sat in a parked car, and they both got shot. Only Carl survived. November 26th of that same year, 16-year-old Donna and 18-year-old Joanne were walking home after seeing a film together. Both survived the incident, but Joanne was left paralyzed. January of the next year, 1977, 26-year-old Christy and her fiancé, John, were sat in a parked car, and they were both shot. Only John survived, and he never got to marry Christy. I can't imagine the heartbreak of being engaged to someone and thinking you have your life with them, and someone taking that away in seconds. At this point, the police obviously were seeing a connection. This wasn't a random thing going on. And their worst fear had come true. They had a serial killer.
This is a police sketch of the suspect in one of the nastiest murder cases New York police have had come their way in a long time. The killer police are looking for is called the .44 caliber killer because of the weapon he has used.
They started finding similarities in all the crimes, which is why David's original name was the .44 caliber killer, because that is the gun he used for most of the shootings. They also noticed that most of the victims were either couples or attractive young women, specifically with long, dark hair. And the scary thing about this particular serial killer is that he was just shooting people on the street, and no one was catching him. Obviously, couples and women with long dark hair were more at risk, but everyone was scared. No one felt safe. Anyone could be a victim if in the wrong place at the wrong time. March 8th, a student was just shot on the street on their walk home. They were apparently instantly killed, but someone noticed that the killer seemed to be driving a yellow Volkswagen. Police took this information and they ran with it. It was the only clue they had gotten this whole time, basically, other than the type of gun. They interviewed loads of people with that same car and nothing came up. They also interviewed thousands of people who had the same .44 caliber, but once again, nothing. April 16th, he struck once again. He killed a couple, but this was a little bit different, because this time he left a note. And in this note, he referred to himself as the son of Sam. Here is what that note said. A few psychiatrists had a look at this note, and they thought that he could potentially be showing signs of paranoid schizophrenia, but I don't believe he was ever diagnosed with that. Yet another shooting happened in May of that year, and more letters kept on coming. His final attack was in July, but he made a mistake. A woman actually saw him right before he committed the crime. He had gotten a ticket on his car, a parking ticket, and that's how she remembered him. And he had something in his sleeve when she passed him, and only a few minutes later,
we crossed each
she
other.
heard the shooting
So he had his arm straight down. He had a long thing like a bell sticking up his sleeve. And he made a left turn. I heard a boom.
So she called the police and let them know about this mysterious man. And you have to realize at this point, a lot of people have died and the police have nothing. So they took this and they ran with it. And this was so lucky because they could simply look at their system and see who got a parking ticket in that area. And lo and behold, it was David Berkowitz. They eventually tracked down his apartment, which had his car parked outside, which was actually a yellow Ford Galaxy, not a, Volkswagen. And in the back seat of his car, they could see a rifle, but no .44 caliber. They searched his car despite the fact that they didn't have a warrant, and that's where they found the .44 caliber. They also found maps of where the killings happened in his car, so it was pretty obvious that it was him. So they arrested him.
David Berkowitz, 24 years old, a postal worker, walked out of his Yonkers apartment last night, turned the ignition key in his car, and found himself surrounded by police. Well, he said, "You got me."
He was arrested on the 10th of August, 1977, and the only thing David had to say was, "What took you so long?" When police searched his apartment, they found it in quite a state. There was like graffiti all over the wall, like occult graffiti. And they also found all his diaries, which basically like talked about his crimes, like all those fires I mentioned earlier. But the police had made a huge mistake at this point. They had searched his apartment and also his car without a warrant. Usually if you search somewhere without a warrant, it's not submissible in court. So they wouldn't be able to use any of that evidence against him in court. But luckily for them, David confessed everything within like the first half hour. I'm not even joking. He had been questioned for less than half an hour before he confessed everything to the police at the station. You're probably wondering, why son of Sam if his name is David? His reasonings for these killings and his name, son of Sam, were very interesting. So I'm going to tell you what he told the police. I just want you to imagine being the police. I would literally be there like this. The name Sam came from his old neighbor, whose name was Sam Carr, and Sam Carr had a black Labrador. And according to David, this dog was possessed by a demon. Yes, this black Labrador was possessed by a demon. The dog's name was Harvey, by the way, and Harvey, dog that is now a demon, was apparently telling David to do these things. I'm gonna have to split this up into 2 parts, but don't worry, it's already out. I'm posting it right after this video. I'm not gonna make you wait 24 hours or anything, so go and check it out.